presentation. We want to focus on David and April, so let's just make sure we're doing that. And if you do have any questions, please take the opportunity to raise your hand in Teams, and then we'll call on you and try to have you come off mute and ask that, or just throw it in the chat. We'll make sure that April and David know about it if they're not already looking at chat. Use live captioning if you need that. It's been beneficial for some people to be able to use that throughout. And of course, be interactive, ask questions, because you could possibly win a $25 gift card for doing that. So that's how we're kind of getting people to interact a little bit if possible. And then don't forget about the giveaway. I'll make sure that get the survey in there. Don't want to spend too much time because I think the biggest thing is for David and April to talk. But guys, sponsors, please make sure that you talk with them. RBA, Concurrency, Sky North, and Cyber Advisors. They're great partners and sponsors for this particular event. And of course, a survey, I'll throw that in there. That's for the Surface Go device. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to our guest of honor.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. I will begin sharing. Let me know when you can see it.
We can see it.
All right, excellent. Well, don't hesitate to tweet out today at reference 0365 MN or hashtag M365 Workshop Day. We appreciate all of the coverage. Let's kick it off. So today we are going to be talking about Masters of the List Formatting Universe, Advanced List Formatting. So if you're He-Man or Masters of the Universe, then you obviously know what we're talking about. We got some Parker thematic artwork for you today. We're gonna have a lot of fun diving into more of the advanced areas in which you can take advantage of list formatting, whether it be from a Power Automate, from a Power Apps, whether it's a development experience that you want to enhance, a variety of ways in which you can utilize list formatting that goes above and beyond just the typical column formatting. And so we're excited to show everybody everything today. My name is David Warner. I am a Microsoft employee, almost said MVP because freshly minted Microsoft employee about a month. Love working with the community, big sports fan, as you can tell by the helmets behind me, and love working with the community even more. So please don't hesitate to reach out or collaborate after this call, ask questions, connect with myself and or April. We love to work with everyone in the community and couldn't do this session without her, April Dunham.
Thank you, David. My name is April Dunham. I work with David at Microsoft. I lead the Power Platform Advocacy team, former MVP, Power Addict, all of that. So again, don't hesitate to reach out to me as well after this on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever it is.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about what we're going to talk about. So we're going to go over some out-of-the-box SharePoint list features that you may or may not have been aware of, right? Some of those list formatting features just to kind of provide the contextual overview of list formatting. And then we're going to dive into some form formatting. We're going to talk about some dynamic filtering, integrating Power Automate. We're going to show how maybe you've struggled with the JSON experience, but you're comfortable with HTML. How can you meld those two worlds together and make it useful? We'll show you some tools there. Integrating Power Apps, and then also how you can integrate the use of VS Code. So if you've ever felt, well, I'm not a full-on developer, I prefer the low-code space. VS Code has always felt a little bit too advanced for me. Don't have to worry about that. We're going to show you how you can utilize it, and there's lots of extensions that you can use to take advantage of it as well. So let's begin with just the general list formatting overview. If you're new to list formatting, but you kind of wanted to see what's capable of it from an advanced view, we want to make sure that you're aware of what it's capable of doing. Column formatting is kind of the most original version of list formatting. That's where when you have your individual lists, something like that, you've got your columns, right? You're able to do something within each of those individual columns. Now you can style them, you can control the content that's being displayed, you can infuse some functionality that maybe didn't exist before. We'll talk a little bit about that. By and large, just remember, everything you do with list formatting, though, is only on the surface level, the presentation layer, if you will. You're not actually changing the content in the list. You're just changing the way it looks and feels and acts for those that are viewing it. So you don't have to worry about it messing up your data behind the scenes or anything like that. View formatting, that's where you're able to control the entire row. So when you have rows of data that have multiple columns within each one of them, like so, you're able to change the entire look and feel, and to some degree the functionality of that row, that's where you're able to change the view. Now, what's really cool about view formatting, by the way, is that you can have multiple views within an individual list. That means that you can do something like rapid dashboarding. Each of those views can have a different look and feel. Oftentimes, the data represents multiple ways to be viewed. And so having those different views, you're able to change the look and feel that is appropriate for maybe different audiences within your organization. So it's very powerful. The newest of the three is form formatting. We're going to dive deeper into that to see how the authoring experience can be enhanced and be improved upon from just the out-of-the-box experience that you get within SharePoint. All of these things together make a really fantastic experience for not only the author, but also the consumer of the information. So what does that look like in practicality? Just as an overview, this is your typical basic list experience, right? You've got rows and columns of data. We're used to that from decades ago. Maybe not decades, a decade maybe, years ago. Column formatting, you're able to change that look and feel of the individual column. You see we've taken the Twitter ID and we've applied the actual Twitter image. You can take it a step further and infuse functionality, making it a hyperlink, including tooltips, all kinds of stuff. View formatting, on the other hand, now you see we're taking that information and we're including calls to action, we're including the image, we're including to some degree external functionality. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment in a demo. And so you're able to kind of see the maturity model here of 0 to hero within the view formatting experience. So much more than just these little images represent, and we're going to go through some of that. So let's start with view formatting. We're going to take a deeper look at view formatting. This kind of starts scratching the surface of advanced list formatting. We're going to go much deeper, but for those that have just kind of started getting involved with list formatting, we want to make sure that you're aware of some of the cool functionality that is available to you. So let's start with that exact profile that we saw. We have a collection of social profiles. Now I've already applied a column format right here, right? So we kind of saw that experience and that's what it looks like. Remember, there's only one column format that can be applied within a list. We talked about having multiple views, being able to change the look and feel per view, but you only have a finite number of columns. Your columns are your columns. And so if you apply a column format, it's going to be that column associated or it's going to be associated to that column in all of your views. The view supersedes, and you'll see that. That's why we did this particular demo the way we did it, is that view formatting will supersede any styling or formatting that you apply at the column level, but it is always associated to that individual column. So we see something here looks a little intense. We see a lot of information that could be populated better in from a editing experience. If I were to go add something new, it certainly could be frustrating when you go and look in here and say, okay, well, I've got multiple countries, and then within each country, there's a specificity of the locations within that country, state and province, and that's only 2 countries. So this is a teaser to that form formatting. The form formatting here could be better, but so could the look and feel of the actual content itself, and that's what we're going to dive deeper into. To edit an individual view, you would go to the all items where you would change your view, and you would simply say format current view. Now, what we'd like to improve here is that all this information is valuable and relevant. The consumption of it is a little bit fragmented, though. As your eyes start trying to read the information, you see a lot of empty spaces that make you wonder, well, why are those empty? Should they have something going in them? Well, not necessarily, because obviously in this case, we're using that as geographic identifiers. In the United States, there is no province. Right? So there's no need to have a province for anywhere that is in the US. Conversely, there's no need to have a state for anywhere in Canada. Right? So you don't need data there, but from a visual perspective, it's inconsistent and it's distracting and it's fragmented. Your eyes don't quite know where to look and you start wondering, why am I seeing so much empty space? Something should be there, and you kind of have to do the logic on your own before you deduct that, oh, it doesn't need to be, but that distracts from everything. So view formatting to the rescue. So we're going to come into view formatting, and view formatting provides the ability through a wizard-like experience, some degree of out-of-the-box formatting that you can apply, right? We've got the alternating row styles, pretty simple conditional formatting where you could apply a different color based on perhaps a particular piece of content within one of those columns. But by and large, It's pretty basic. Why? Well, because from a view perspective, there's no way Microsoft could possibly analyze all the different data you have and assume that at a view or a row level, you're going to want it to look like ABC, a card, or something else, right? So pretty basic styling that they apply here for you to use with a wizard. But it's a great starter if you still want to apply some degree of color differential or some degree of color coding to the information that's there based on a particular value in an individual row or column. So good start. But we really want to take it to the extreme. So I'm going to hit edit in advanced mode, right? After having selected one of those things like the alternating row style, hit advanced mode. And you'll see it's pre-populated. It's done that because I had already selected something. So when you switch to advanced mode, then it's going to give you access to the JSON that it generated for you by way of using the wizard, which is a great learning tool, by the way. So if you're ever just getting started with this JSON, who is that guy? It actually stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Don't get overwhelmed by thinking that it's a bunch of programmatic logic. It's really just a hierarchical structure of how you want your data to look. And we'll give you another view of that when we talk about converting HTML to this. It kind of outlines it a little bit better, a little easier to see. But we're just going to select all and delete because we've already created a pre-existing view that we want to show you. And again, most of today is about consumption of what's possible. So don't want you to feel overwhelmed that what you're going to look at in the JSON structure is something that you need to be familiar with. We are using a lot of copying and pasting. And the reason we're doing that is because everything we're going to show you today is available from a repository in GitHub that you can access these and hundreds more of samples for absolutely free to use, to learn, to start, to jumpstart your list formatting experience. So we're going to do a lot of copying and pasting, not dive too deep into the code so you don't have to feel like you're overwhelmed. For today, though, what we'd love to do is we'd love to turn this into a card format that's going to show a little bit better experience for the consumer. Less fragmentation, less distracting, gaping holes of content. So I'm just going to copy and paste a format, and I'm going to paste it here. And you see it's 119 lines. So I said we won't go too much deep, but again, it's not very big, I guess, is the point that I want to kind of convey here. And I'm going to hit preview. And now what we've done is we've taken the information that's available to us. We've taken the name, we've taken the Twitter URL or Twitter name, and we've created a call to action here, right? So if I were to right click and go to that Twitter, I can see Chris's Twitter. I can go down to April, right click, and it's or open in a new tab. You can set it up that way automatically. And now I can go and follow April and learn a little bit more about her on Twitter. But what's missing is that geographic location. Now, I could have made a couple of decisions. I could have utilized this space right here if I wanted to. And I could have just said Tennessee, USA, Denver, USA, Quebec or Montreal, Canada, etc. Would have been absolutely useful. And you can still do that. But another area of advanced list formatting is knowing that you can actually plug into other data sources of information. Now, we're not talking about programmatic APIs, if you will, or connecting to something, sending JavaScript, getting an actual JavaScript array back. We're talking about something where we just call a URL, and what that returns is HTML that can just be rendered. List formatting supports that. So think a mapping system, right? Google Maps, for example, allows us to do that. So if I select all and replace here, I'm able to identify where it is that I'm looking. So very simple, again, not diving too much into the code, but I'm just sending a message out to Google that's identifying if it's US or Canada, and whether or not I want to send a state or a province, right? So pretty simple stuff, and I'm going to hit save. And now what it's done is it's pulled in the actual geographic location. Now, the only thing I had was the country and state. So you can see that there's a pretty broad spectrum of geographic information here based on the only information that I had. If I had a more precise location, perhaps a city and or an exact address, then Google Maps will support that. Bing Maps will support that. And it's interactive. It's not just a photo for purposes of, oh, here they generally are, but I can actually click on that, open it up, and now it shows me, oh, cool, there they are. So think something like office locations or general staffing locations or something that's applicable to you. You could actually provide directions and make it interactive here just via list formatting if you have that level of granularity to your address. So some really cool stuff, really awesome. This just scratches the surface, really starts to show some of those advanced topics within view formatting. Now, I had mentioned that the editing experience could be better, right? Because when we come in here, we don't know necessarily that if I select Canada, I'm supposed to select a province, or if I'm selecting United States, I'm supposed to select a state and not a province, and vice versa. And that's only 2 countries. What if it's more complex than that? Well, I'm going to hand it over to April, and we're going to talk a little bit about form formatting.
All right, thank you, David. So form formatting, as David said, that's going to help us really kind of get rid of that duplication that we're seeing in the form. So if we take off where he left off here on the social profiles, we know if we add a new item, we see that we have the country, we can choose Canada or the United States, and then we have the state and the province. Now we don't want both to show in the form experience. This is a really common use case that we have in the forms, which should be easy to customize, but it hasn't always been in the past, right? Just how can we conditionally show or hide state or province based off of the selection of the dropdown above, also known as cascading dropdowns. You might have heard it referred to as that. Well, we can do that with the new form formatting capability. So I'm here in our new form view right now, and you might notice this little icon on the top right-hand corner. So if we click that edit form icon, we have 3 options. The first one being edit columns. So we can use this feature of form formatting to actually be able to apply some logic to the individual columns in our form. So we see that we have the Twitter, country, state, and province columns. What I can do is I can click on, say, the state column, and I click the 3 dots next to it. We have an option for edit conditional formula. So this gives me a text box where I can put in a conditional formula here to show or hide this particular column in our form. And this will apply to the new form and the edit and the display form and all of that. So how do we do this? Well, if we are familiar with kind of Excel type formulas, or if we've ever did calculated columns in SharePoint, like in some of the older versions of SharePoint there, then this should be very familiar to you. So if I want to show or hide conditionally this country field, all I have to do is a simple if statement. So I can say if, and I can pull in the name of the column that I want to check off of. So it's our country column. So you just put it in square brackets with the $sign before the name of your column. So I can say if that value equals United States, then this particular column should be true. Otherwise, it should be false, meaning it should be visible or invisible based off of that. So if I were to copy this and we go back here to, let me just escape out of that real quick, to our field here, what we can paste that in. So now we have our conditional formula. I can click save, and you see when I do that, that goes to a little gray there. So that lets me know that I do have a conditional formula applied to this particular field in my form. So I can go through and simply do the same thing. I can click the 3 dots and edit a conditional formula for province, and is simply changing out the equals to Canada instead of the United States, and paste that in here and save that as well. And now I can save the settings for my columns in the form. And we can do more than this, obviously. So if I want to change the order as well, I can drag and drop to change the order of my fields in the form here as well. So lots we can do in this particular screen. So now if I close out, I'll just do a refresh to make sure that's applied. And now I try to go add a new item. We should see, here we go. We're only seeing the country field. So if I were to go add David into this and I click country, if I choose United States, I get the option to fill in the state dropdown. But if I switch it back to Canada, I get the option to choose the province dropdown instead. So really basic functionality, but really powerful to be able to customize and tweak our forms and be able to do these type of cascading dropdowns or really granular show and hide conditions here for our dropdowns. Right. Now, what else can we do though with the form? So we just showed how we can do this dynamic show and hiding and all that. But what if we want to customize forms even more? And to demo this, I'm going to actually switch to a different list that has a little bit more going on with it. So I've used the Microsoft list template for asset management. So in this one, you can see if I add a new item, we have quite a few fields. So we can store information about an asset, like the manufacturer, the model. We scroll down, we see there's lots of scrolling involved in this particular form, which might not be ideal, right? From a user experience standpoint, we might want to organize this into different buckets, maybe have a 2, 3, 4 column layout in this instead of having to have a bunch of scrolling. Maybe we want to have a header because the header right now just says new item. And we don't even really have a footer on this. So those are some of the things that we can do with form formatting. We can inject headers, footers, and even control the format of the body of the form. So let's start maybe with a footer, because that's a very simple example. So maybe on this asset management list, I want to be able to have a simple footer that's a hyperlink to start a chat with the asset owner. So if I want to be able to check out this asset or find out when they're going to return it, maybe I want to have a quick link to chat with the person. So we can do that with some form formatting here. So if we look at this sample, compared to what David showed with the list formatting there, this is only 40 lines, or 39 actually, lines of JSON that we have to put in here. So very, very simple. All I'm going to do is put in a div, and we're going to add an A tag, which is just a way to do a hyperlink. So I'm dynamically going to, in this case, point to a Teams chat. So there's some shortcuts that we can put in to link directly to chat with a particular user. So I can do a Teams call or a Teams chat, whichever one I want, and I can pull in information dynamically, and I can show the information of like need help, contact the help desk, right? So if we just copy this, I'll show how we can apply that into our form. So if we go back and just again to remind you how I got there, we're going to click on the new button, like we're adding a new item into our form. And we're going to go back into the upper right-hand corner on that edit form icon. But instead of going to edit columns, we're going to go to configure layout. This gives us the ability to inject that JSON into the different areas of our form. So we see we have a drop down here that says apply formatting to. So here we can specify if we want to apply this in the header, body, or the footer. So in my case, I want this to be a little tag in the footer. So I can select the footer and just simply paste in the JSON code, just as David did with the list formatting example. And we can click save. And now you see, as soon as I do that, if I scroll down to the bottom of my form, I have a hyperlink that if I were to click that would go try to open a Teams conversation. So pretty simple use case that we can do there with kind of a footer element there. But what if we want to have, say, a header? So maybe we want to have some quick information. Maybe we want to show the item name. Maybe we want to have some kind of graphic or visual representation of the status, whether the item is available, if it's checked out to someone. Wouldn't that be cool to have a more visual header to show that information in? We can do a quick form formatting example for that as well. So if we look at this header, a little bit more going on with this sample here, about 148 lines. But essentially, we're just applying some styling. And that's all that list formatting, column formatting, form formatting is we're applying custom styles to our SharePoint and Microsoft list. So I'm going to do some checks on the status field, because like I said, we have a status that we can either mark an asset as available or out of stock, pending, whatever that is. So I can do for this div, for example, I can say if the status is blank, then I'm going to show a white background. If it's available, I want the background to be green. And if it's in use, blue, and so on and so forth, just going into the different statuses and changing the background color that shows in the header. So just one example of things we can do, and a little bit more going on where we can actually take fields and surface those up in the header as well. So I want to get the model number, the asset type, and all of that. And we're just going to add that in. So let's copy this sample. And again, these are all on the GitHub repo that David mentioned. And now in this section here, we're going to make sure we have the apply formatting to header selected, and we'll paste that code in. Now when we click save, you'll notice here that I'm not seeing anything change. Now there's a reason for that, because right now we're in a new form. We don't have any data filled out, so there's really no reason to have all this data surfaced up when it's an empty new form. This really would only apply for if we're editing an existing item or if we're viewing an existing item, that we would see this kind of specialized header. So if I close out of this right now and I click on one of these existing items, like say Clippy here, and we edit that, Now we see our custom header applied because we do have data filled out for this. So we're doing a few things. Here's that color coding that I was mentioning. So it's purple because this is in use right now. I'm pulling in information about the asset, the image of the asset, and even including a hyperlink to email the manufacturer if there's an issue with it, right? So lots of things we can do to really create these nice custom header elements in our forms. And lastly, again, we still have the problem of there's lots of scrolling with the actual fields of data in our form. This is not ideal. So what if I want to be able to visually, group this by different buckets? So maybe I'll have information about the asset itself, maybe information about the checkout history. And so maybe I want to have this in, say, a 2, 3, 4 column layout. Well, that's another thing that we can do quite simply with the body capability to edit the form body in the form formatting. So really all you have to do if you want to break out your forms into sections like this and have multi-column layout is we're going to use this sections tag. And for each section, you'll give your section a display name. So I have one called info, and then you'll have a property called fields, and you're going to put in the field names that you want in that particular section, separated out by a column. So I'm just repeating this process. So I'm going to have an info section, details with these fields, owners, and then finally status. So very, very simple, not much to that if you just want to do some lightweight grouping like that. So to apply this one more time, we're going to go to our new button. We're going to go back into the edit kind of formatting section here in the upper right-hand corner, and we're going to go to configure layout again. Now this time we're going to do the final option of choosing the apply formatting to the body, and we will paste in that sample and click save. And now you see, as soon as I do that, it updated my form for me. Now I have a 3-column layout. Here are my section headers that we added here, the info, details, owners, and status, and then all of my columns moving in the sections there accordingly. So lots we can do here with this capability. This is just scratching the surface. Like anything that we can do with list formatting from a style capability, we can apply here to our forms. So really, really cool new functionality that we have here to be able to customize our forms. Now I'm going to turn it back to David, who's going to be showing us how we can take this, whoopsie daisy, a bit further here.
Awesome. Thank you, April. So now we're going to dive into some pretty rapid examples and demos of a variety of things. So one of the first we're going to begin with is dynamic filtering. So we've seen a lot of ways to be able to style your list formatting, but you can take that list formatting and actually apply it to your pages. And how does that work? Well, let's take a look. I'm on a page here, and the out-of-the-box list web part provides full access to our list formatting experience. So when I go to edit a page, I can go and drop the list web part. This is just the basic out-of-the-box list web part onto a page, and you can see that we can edit it and we can select which list that we'd like to do. So I've got 2 different social profile lists, one for column formatting and one for view formatting. And I'm going to start with all items. We'll just hit apply. And so what we get is the experience that I had applied there. Now, if I hadn't applied those, right, perhaps I were to go back to my list here and I got rid of that view formatting experience. So let's just go back to what it is out of the box here. We'll hit save. We'll come back to my dynamic filtering page and we will hit republish. What we get is that basic list experience, which is fine. But again, it would look much, much better if it was actually styled. Now, also, we can filter the information that's being displayed here in sort of an interactive dashboard. So how does that work? So I'm going to add over on this side, the left side, I'm going to add another list. And in this case, I'm going to edit it, and I'm just going to select the column formatting social profiles. And I'm going to hit apply. And so now what I see is I see that information, right? Less information than you get on the view formatting because we had the country, state, and province. And what I can do is I can do a few things. One, we'd like to clean it up. So we can hide the command bar and hide the see all button. We're going to do that on both. So now I've cleaned that up a little bit. I also want to do that on the view formatting. So I'm going to hit edit that web part and I'm going to hide it there as well. But I'm also going to use the dynamic filtering. So what that allows me to do is turn that on. and it says, what is the column in this web part that you would like to filter on? Well, the commonality between them is Twitter, right? So we've got, even though this has been formatted behind the scenes, it's still the same value as that. So I'm going to say Twitter, and then it asks, well, what's the list or library containing the filter value? So in this case, I'm going to choose that column formatting social profiles. And you'll notice that that's the exact same thing as right there, right? So it's contextually aware of what lists, web parts you've actually put on the page. So I'm going to select that. And now it asks, well, okay, I've selected that, but what's the common column between the two that you would like to filter on? Well, they both have a Twitter account, so I'm going to hit that and I'm going to hit apply. So now I can actually come in here and I can select Chris, and now the only one I see is Chris. I can deselect Chris and I select Bo, and that's the only one I see. I can select April, that's the only one I see. I can select multiple, and now I can see multiple. But of course, we want this to be a better experience, and so we're going to change the actual view. So we're on our column formatting, and so I'm going to select Twitter pick only. So now I want it to look a little better. And over here, I'm going to select contact card, and I'm going to hit apply. And so now I've got a little cleaner experience when I put this into published mode, that I can actually see the images of the Twitter account. And as I click on them, I'm able to then filter. Now, that's between two different lists. Could I do the same thing with just one list, right? Because what you'll notice is when I deselect this, there's some additional community members in my view formatting list. We've got Emily, we've got Hugo. They're not in the column formatting list, so it might be a little confusing. Does that mean that we could use the same list to filter itself, right? Almost seems like Inception, but the answer is yes. So I'm going to delete this. Well, actually, I don't even need to delete. I'm just going to edit it. And I'm going to select the view formatting social profiles. And now I'm going to just select a view that I've already created called Twitter column, right? And I'm going to hit apply. And now we're looking at the exact same list, right, in both places. And we could always edit that title if we want to, but the exact same list in both places that represents everyone in the list. And when I come back here, you'll notice it's even updated itself, right? It still knows that I'm looking at that web part because that web part had changed its list. It preserved the connection and it preserved the column that it was connecting to because it still had it. So that's fantastic. It's pretty contextually aware. So now I'm going to put this into published mode, and we see all of them here. And now I'm able to still filter, and we see Hugo, and we see Emily, and we see April. And so I'm able to do some filtering here in a way that works on a page. So we're harnessing all of the beauty that is list formatting, but now we're taking it up a notch and putting it onto an actual exposed page, and we're able to provide an interactive experience that's beyond just a better look and feel. It's actually improving the functionality of the data that's there in a way that you're not going to just necessarily get if you're just directly on the list itself. So very, very popular and very cool way of being able to provide that enhanced experience. But wait, there's more. Can you integrate Power Automate? Absolutely. So let's hand it back over to April, and she'll walk us through that.
You sure can. One of my favorite things to do with list formatting is integrating with the Power Platform. So let's see how it works. And before we move on, just like a quick note about what David just showed. Really cool stuff that we can do there too from a Power Up standpoint. Don't have a demo of it, but just wanted to mention that there, Hugo Bernier created a Power Apps web part that allows you to pass in parameters to it. So you can use dynamic filtering with what David just showed and actually pass data into your Power App and have an interactive experience there with, say, your list, and then having that open up data in your Power App. So lots of stuff that you can do there. But now let's talk about Power Automate. So how can we integrate Power Automate with our list? So to demo this, we have an event itinerary list. Now you might have noticed if you've integrated Power Automate with SharePoint before, that we have this automate button here on our command bar. So we can click on that, say we can click on one of these items here. We can go to automate and we can see the different flows that we have associated with this particular list. So in my case, I actually have a flow to help me send out event reminders for these events coming up. So I can obviously do it this way using kind of the integrated command bar experience. But as you'll notice, if I want to send out a reminder about our master the list formatting session, there's a lot of clicks involved to do it this way. I have to click on automate. I have to click on the name of my flow. I have to have that open up on the right-hand side, wait till it loads, and then I'll have to make another click to run the flow and then start it, right? So kind of not the most ideal experience probably for getting a flow kicked off. What if we could use list formatting to do that for us? So we have essentially a single click, 2 clicks at most. So what if I wanted to say repurpose this reminder column so that if it doesn't say sent, I want to have a button that I can click that says send reminder, and that just automatically opens up that panel on the right-hand side. Well, we can do that pretty easily. So to show how this works, I'm going to go open Visual Studio Code again, and we're going to look at this sample. Now, this one is extremely simple if we want to just kick off a workflow in Power Automate with list formatting. The main thing that we need to do is we need to know here in this property, in between these quotes here, this GUID that we're seeing, we need to be able to get the GUID of the flow that we want to run. So that's the key part to making this work. Let me show you how we get that GUID. So we're going to go back over here to Power Automate, and we're going to find the flow that we want to kick off. So we're going to go to My Flows, and in my case, it is this event reminder flow. So if we just look at it in edit mode, so you know what's going on, the initiation of the flow is for selected item. So that's how it's being able to kick off. We can select an item in the SharePoint list. It'll kick off, get the item details. It's a very simple flow. It's just going to send an email out to whoever needs to get the reminder, and then we'll update the item in that reminder field to sent once that's done so that we know that its reminder has been sent. But if we want to get the GUID of this, what we're going to do is click on the flow. And here in our address bar, we'll see 2 different GUIDs. So you need to know which one to point to. Now this first one here, we have environments and then / default, and that is the GUID of your Power Platform environment. We don't want that one. We want the one at the very end after the flows tag. So this one right here, in between flows and details. So we're going to copy that, and that's what we'll use in our list formatting because that references the flow. So once we have that, we can paste that in here in our list formatting sample. And again, this is on the GitHub repo. And the only additional thing that I'm doing here is some little conditional formatting here. So based off of that reminder field, if the text sent is in there, meaning the workflow is run, then I want to show green. Otherwise, I want it to be red. And then finally, I want to have an icon and I want to change the text. So if it is sent, I want a check mark icon. And if it's not, I want to send a little reminder icon and then change the text of sent if it's sent and then send reminder if it's not. It's very straightforward, pretty simple here. So let's copy this and see how this will actually work in the list. So we're going to go back to our list. We're going to use column formatting for this. So we talked about it briefly at the beginning, how this is kind of the OG original, kind of what kicked off SharePoint list formatting here was with being able to apply this to our columns. So we're going to go into our reminder column. We're going to click the drop down, go to column settings, and format this column. So we can use, here's the out of the box options, but we want to go here to the advanced mode so we get that text box to paste in our JSON. We'll replace what's in there and do a paste, and let's save. And now we'll see how automatically our kind of column there changes. So now everything that was blank, we have this send reminder text with a little kind of clock icon. And everything that had sent in it, we have this icon here that's green letting us know it's sent. So what this just did for me is if I want to send out a reminder for our list formatting session, all I have to do is click on that send reminder text, and now that panel automatically opens on the right-hand side. That was the thing that took at least 2 clicks when we clicked on the Power Automate button there in the ribbon. So now all we have to do is run the flow, and we are off and running. It lets us know that it started. And here in a second, if I do a quick refresh, because that flow should run pretty fast, we should see that it got sent off. So there we go. So now the status changed from send reminder, or the text there, to sent for that session. So just really helps to make the user experience even more easy and intuitive for kind of integrating your flows with your list formatting with your list here. But you might be thinking, okay, that's cool, but I really then, if that's the case, if I'm encouraging users to use this, my column formatting, to kick that off, I really don't want them going here, clicking on automate and doing it that way, because they might duplicate the process here. If a reminder's already sent, we don't want to allow them to do duplicate reminders. Well, there's some hot off the process new functionality where we can actually modify this command bar, is what it's called, where all these icons and buttons are here, to make it to where you can either hide that or move it somewhere, like maybe move it to this not so visible kind of extra items button here, or we can hide the button entirely, or even just hide particular elements in it. So this is actually something that was just demoed on the community call, which we'll talk more about later on, by Chris Kent last week. So let's see how this could work. All right. So first, I'm going to show you how we can maybe move this to be not so prominent on the command bar. So this is very, very simple. So there's the magic that's happening behind the scenes that makes this possible is this command bar props property and then commands. So I'm actually going to paste this, and we'll take a look at what it looks like in the editor, because I want to show you a bit what's going on. Now, to apply this, you're going to apply it as a view format. So we're going to go to a particular view where you want to edit this command bar. So like maybe this one we're in now, this grid view. And we're going to click on that drop down like David showed us earlier, and we're going to go to Format Current View. Then we're going to go back to our advanced mode, and I will paste in that sample here. So the thing I want to show you is these keys. So if I were to delete right now key and just start typing, we actually have some IntelliSense that lets us know what keys we can modify. So for this command bar, we have all kinds of different buttons that are available to us. So we could use this not only to hide the automate button, but even the edit and the new. And I'm going to get to that later when we talk about some more Power Platform integration. But we would simply select the automation here that we want to show or hide. So in our case, it was the Power Automate. And then the thing, if we want to make it show in this overflow, which is this right here. So we click the three dots. This is called the overflow. So it will move it from being really prominent here to this overflow section. And then position 0 is really important in this case, because if you just do this key and section type, it will not move it for you. It needs that position of 0 for this to be able to work. So let's save. And hopefully that worked there. Let me I think I might have, yeah, it's not Power Automate, it is Automate. I knew that's why I pasted that in there for a reason. So let's repaste this in as Automate. There we go. That zoomed it in, crazy high. Okay, there you go. So now you see, once I save that, now I don't have that Automate button here. But if I click on the three dots, it moved it to this little overflow section. So it makes it slightly less visible. But again, a user could still click on this technically if they knew to click there and then here and get to that workflow, which we don't want to have happen. So there's one other thing that we can do as an option with this capability, and that's to be able to hide it completely. So if we use this option here, using the same key as automate, we have a property called hide. So we can set hide to true, and that will hide that completely, except for we don't want to, if we go back and kind of talk about what's happening with this automate button, you might notice that we have these rules. I don't know if you've used rules before with Power Automate integration with our SharePoint list, but they're actually pretty cool because it gives us a way, without having to go into Power Automate and do all that, to apply some lightweight rules, like when a new item is created, send an email to me, right? So it just gives you like a more simple out-of-the-box experience for doing some of these lightweight workflow processes. So I don't really want to disable my users from being able to go and take advantage of rules. I just don't want them to be able to go in and click on that workflow because we're doing that in column formatting. So that's why if we look at the sample here, we have the selection modes. So this is where I can specify, I want to specifically hide the single selection and multi-selection, but still show rules. So that's how granular we can get with kind of the being able to customize what shows in that command bar. So if I copy that now and we were go back to our format current view, and replace our overflow option there with this and click save. There we go. So now you see automate comes back. But if I click on it, we can see rules. But now if I were to select one of these items and click on automate, now you see I don't see automate anywhere, right? That's because it's locking down the ability to run a flow for that current item and only giving us the ability to set custom rules, right? So very, very powerful functionality. Like I said, brand new, and lots that we can do with it. And I'll show you a little bit more of that integration here in a second. But until then, I'm going to turn it back over to David so he can talk about how we can convert HTML to JSON to make this formatting stuff a little bit easier.
Awesome. Thank you, April. That stuff is super, super cool. I love how the continuation and maturity of list formatting lets us control more and more where we don't want to override it with something like CSS and Microsoft is listening. That's great. All right, so as April had mentioned, JSON can be a little bit frustrating sometimes if you're not used to it. It isn't really JavaScript in the sense that you're writing methods or functions, but it is still somewhat intimidating when you start trying to follow the trail. You get some of these that are long, and it can get a little unwieldy to try to understand where you are in the context. Wouldn't it be great if we're comfortable with just writing simple HTML like image tags, div tags, anchor tags? That could be converted for us. Well, guess what? There is a wizard that you can access that is called HTML to Formatter. I'll paste the link in the chat there for you, and then we'll make sure it's part of the video as well. But if you go here, you're able to paste in HTML that we see right here. There's a box there to put in HTML. You can also put in CSS, which we'll talk about in a moment, and then it converts right over here the JSON for you and actually shows you a preview. So what's a valid use case for this? Well, let's take our column formatting example. We have our format here, Twitter. We would like to convert that starting by just using HTML. And we'd like to see how that would look. So what's the process for that? Well, we're going to iteratively do it. And this is kind of a better example of the reality of how you might accomplish this. Is the recommendation is start small and start basic when you're writing your HTML. Don't try to write too much because you're maybe not sure that it's going to convert properly until you're comfortable. So in this case, I'm just going to start with a simple image tag, right? I've just got a simple little image tag that is pointing to Chris's profile picture on a specific URL. Now, you might say, well, that's a hard-coded URL, right? Well, doesn't that mean that when you put that into your format, you want your format to be dynamic, not absolute, right? Absolutely, you are right. When I hit run, though, the beauty here is that I'm able to see the preview right here in the actual HTML to Formatter experience. So it shows me that at least my format and my anchor or my URL is accurate. It's pulling back an actual image. And I'm then able to see the actual format that was created for me automatically and then click the copy button. So as I mentioned, what would happen, I copy that, I come back over here, I've already got the Twitter column ready. I'm going to paste that in. And what would you expect that'll happen? We still see that hard-coded URL. Well, of course, at this point, everybody becomes Chris, right? And it's not formatted like we want. It's really just the image, absolutely to be expected. But the point that I'm trying to make here is sometimes it's good to start with some hard-coded values just to make sure that everything is syncing up correctly at the very beginning. Then you can absolutely integrate dynamic variables and values into your HTML here in a way that will then convert everything appropriately. So what does that look like? Well, if I was to do exactly that, I'm going to select all, I'm going to replace that with the exact same thing. But in this case, I'm using what is actually concatenation and a valid value that's used in list formatting. So that at current field is going to, within the context of your SharePoint list and Microsoft list, give you the value of that exact current field. Why am I showing this to you? Well, because when I hit run, it looks broken here, to be expected. It's generating a URL based on this value right here, which is dynamic. Well, that value right there is all mapped and taken care of for us by the list formatting behind the scenes. So the preview here is broken, so it's a little bit hard to kind of see that. It makes it harder to kind of understand what's going on. But if that's the case, no problem. We just hit copy and we can come over here. And now when I replace that and I hit preview, okay, cool. Now it's actually going out and pulling in the actual values based on the list. It just makes it a little bit harder to see in the context of this. So you absolutely could kind of bring them up side by side if you wanted to, and do it that way. Or you could simply just maintain the hard-coded reference to an image to make sure your styling all works appropriately within the context of the tool. It's a little subjective. Tomato, right? What are you comfortable with? What do you like? I tend to start very simple with some hard-coded values, and then as I'm moving in, I'll just copy and paste over because I don't want to have to replace it later once I get down into the nitty-gritty. I prefer to see it working as expected, not using a single hard-coded value. So what else can we do? We know that we want it to be round. We know that we want it to utilize the tooltip, right? So let's iteratively start doing that. I'm going to copy in some more HTML here that's going to start changing the look and feel. So now what I've done is I still have it dynamic, but I've added in some styles here that allow me to implement some of that rounded cornerness feeling, look and feel. And it'll take care of all that. Now I'm putting that style directly in line. Right, so that's all CSS, even though there's a place for it right here. So does it have to be one versus the other? No, it's still going to work both ways, and I'll show you how to use the actual CSS box in a moment. But if I hit run, you see now what it's done is it's recognized the values for my CSS, and it's created that style block there for me that is part of the JSON schema so that it's appropriately recognized by the formatting. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to paste. Whoop. Oh, didn't copy. Let me copy. Go over here, select all, paste. There we go. Preview. Now we see it's starting to do some things, right? I don't quite have everything I need yet, but that was the first piece of needing to make some adjustments at the image level. So now I'm going to take the next step, and you might not necessarily go this iteratively. You might create the HTML hard-coded, paste it in, and do a replacement. In this case, just kind of showing you exactly how that iterative process works. So now I still have my image tag, but I've added some additional layers of abstraction in the div with its own styling that is going to provide me that rounded corners, the border radius, and all that to make it a nice rounded image. So I'm going to hit run, and now you see it's expanded it even more. So it sees that there's an element type. It's got a child, right? So I've got a div within a div. It recognizes that. It creates the child. The image is a child of that inner div, so it recognizes that. So it understands the hierarchical structure of our HTML. So I'm going to copy that, come back over, select all, paste, preview, and great. Now I've got my images in rounded formats as I would like them to be. But wait, there's more. We could add that additional layer of the alt tags to be a nice accessibility feature. So I'm going to select all, copy, and what I've added here is the title and the alt, right? So we're using the current field function again that's going to be utilized within list formatting. I'm going to hit run, and we see now that's been added as an attribute to my outer div. Right, and if I copy that, come back over, select all, paste, preview, visually nothing changed, right? But we know it's an alt tag. So now when I hover over the element, we see the actual value giving us access to that information that still lives and is what the list content is made up of, but hidden because we're using the image instead of the actual value. Pretty cool. Now, let's say we do want to abstract our CSS and HTML here. Not a problem. You can do that in a variety of ways. So I'm going to say, well, you know what? In this structure right here, I only have one image tag. So I'm going to use the tag type as opposed to an actual class name. So I'm able to then pull in that CSS. And so I'm just going to delete that style tag altogether. And I'm going to paste that right there. And of course, I could clean it up, make it look nicer. If I were to cut that out, right? So now I have no styling on it and I run it, then we see that the styling associated to my image tag is gone, as we would expect it to be. If I paste that back in and run it again, it sees that I have applied that particular styling to just the image. And we see it's not been applied to the div. Pretty cool. Okay, so let's take that one step further. Let's move over the div styling that we have here. So I'm going to say div, and I'm going to just copy that over. I'm going to paste, and I'm going to get rid of that styling right there. So we just have a div or a div, and I'm going to hit run. Except if you notice what's happened, because I'm using the style block designation here or selector, the specificity is not to the actual div that I want. And we have two divs, right? We have two divs there. We have the outer div and the inner div. And so what it's done now is it's applied that styling to the outer div and the inner div. Not exactly what we want. So if I were to copy that and come over and select all and paste, it cuts off the bottom there, right? Because it's doing a little bit of a double application of that styling. That's not really what we want. So does it allow for the specificity of a class name? You betcha. So we can come in here and say class equals, and I'll just say list formatting. I'm going to copy that, and instead of div, I'm going to do the typical list formatting reference to that class name. I'm going to hit run, and now you'll notice that it has been removed from the outer div, right? And it's only being applied. So we only see those alt and title attributes now on that outer div, and on the child is where we see that style being applied. Now again, all this could be viewed in the preview here if I had made this a hard-coded value. Again, a little tomato. I wouldn't have to go back and forth. Really just depends on what your, desires are or what you prefer. It's very preferential. I'm okay copying it and kind of going back and forth and pasting because in the end, it's one less thing that I have to do at the end. So I'm okay with that. And now when I hit preview, you see that, of course, it's back to normal. I'm seeing full circles as I would like to see them. And I can apply that and save it, and away I go. So lots of ways in which you are able to find comfort in designating some HTML here and the ability to construct it in a way that you're comfortable with. It supports both inline styling. It supports the ability to inject the actual dynamic value that you need here. You see we're able to construct the actual src equals or source equals. I'm able to say and put it in a format that list formatting understands. It doesn't break here. Technically, that's not exactly proper HTML, but it knows what to look for. And so it properly converts it here. Alternatively, you could use that hard-coded value if I wanted to be able to see that. And I could do that, right? So if I were to come over, and I'll just select that right here off screen, and I'll come and I'll do that. And now I can hit run and I can see that. Right, so if I were to change this back to div and hit run, it's not as noticeable, but you can kind of see it's a little more hard cut off there at the top due to the fact that it's applied that twice. So you can kind of go back and forth if you want to. Again, subjective, but there are multiple ways to take advantage of it. You can apply the class names right out here as well, so you can kind of separate them, which is great, or you can do it inline if you want to as well. And you see I also get the actual tooltip right there. So it's full HTML down here. Of course, it's using the designation that list formatting is looking for to make it dynamic, but you are able to be able to experience it in totality here in the preview box, which is pretty useful. So a way to kind of get comfortable. It's a great learning tool as well. Sometimes it's more comfortable just to write some HTML than it is to try to figure out how that HTML has to be constructed. So you can create your HTML, kind of hit run, and see how it's being created for you. Great learning tool, by the way, if you're just getting started and wanting to take more advantage of some of these pieces of functionality. All right. That is converting HTML to JSON. I'm going to hand it back over to April now. We're going to talk about integrating Power Apps.
Thank you, David. I love that HTML JSON converter. I use it all the time myself, so very cool to see the walk through that. All right, so more Power Platform integration. So again, this is my favorite piece of functionality here. It's overwhelmingly simple, but super powerful at the same time. So one of the first things that I did with list formatting was actually this integration I'm about to show. So back on our event itinerary list here. So I'm using the Microsoft list template to be able to put in and store the data for our events and sessions. But this isn't really the experience that I want my end users to see. The experience I want them to see is I built a Power App for event scheduling. So actually the end experience is a little bit more advanced. So I might have this view here where they can see an Ignite almost like experience to be able to explore and browse sessions that they have. So I can see for today, all the sessions we have, and I can even click on one, get all the details, find additional resources like session evaluation, so much more information than what's available in the SharePoint list, right? I can even RSVP and add that onto my schedule, which we see here on the My Schedule tab. So I can see everything that I've signed up for. So this is a very common use case of SharePoint, right? We use it all the time, right or wrong, for a backend for our Power Apps applications, right? Lots of good use cases for using your SharePoint list as a backend for your app. Now, what's the inherent problem though with using SharePoint as your backend? Well, it's not a real database, which is fine. There's good use cases for it, but the big kind of problem with that is if we're using the list as a backend, people can still go to this list and bypass your app, right? So like that's not the ideal experience to be able to go to the list and bypass it. Now there are all kinds of things that we can do, and there's tricks and tips that people in the community have shared, and even myself, on like how to kind of tweak it. But the best approach, in my opinion, for using SharePoint as your backend for your Power Apps is to leverage list formatting. So the first thing that I'll do if I'm using SharePoint as my backend is I'll use column formatting, similarly to what we did with the Power Automate example here, to be able to make one of these columns a hyperlink to open the details about the item. So bypassing the SharePoint list in that case and going straight to the details about the item. So how do we do that? Well, again, very simple example here. We're just going to turn that column into a hyperlink, and we're going to pass in this href property, the URL of the Power App that you want to open. Now, the only extra thing that I'm doing here is since we're wanting to open up an item that already exists in that SharePoint list, we need to be able to pass in what's called a parameter to our Power App to go directly to that specific item. So if we look at this URL for a Power App at the very end, you'll notice I added an ampersand and then the text session ID equals. That is my parameter name that I'm going to pass into my Power App. And then here I have a plus. Whoops, sorry, I keep scrolling back to the left there. I have a plus and then in brackets there, $ID. So that's our ID column in our SharePoint list that we're going to dynamically get and pass back into our Power Apps and store it in that session ID parameter. So that's all that's needed for the code sample here for the JSON. Now to get that ID, that URL of your Power App, you're going to go to your Power Apps portal, find the application that you want to open, click on the three dots and go to details. And this is the URL here, the web link is what we want to copy and paste into our formatting. So let's go back here and we'll copy this simple format here and we'll go back to our list. So here in our list, we're going to let's reuse this session code field. It doesn't really matter what field you're using, even though we're going to pass in the ID. We don't have to put it on the ID field. It can be any of the columns that we have in our list. So I'm going to click the drop down. We'll go to column settings and format and advanced mode. And we'll paste in that sample and click save. Okay. Let's see if it applied there. So we'll do a quick refresh. There we go. So now you'll see as soon as I save that, it looks quite a bit different. So I have an icon here letting me know that this actually is a hyperlink. And when I hover over it, I even included a tooltip as far as the formatting there to let the user know that by clicking on that, they're going to be opening the app. So if I go down to the list formatting session and click that, that's going to take me directly to my Power App application. And you'll see it bypassed that landing screen that we saw where we're kind of browsing all the sessions and took me directly to the information about David's session here. And it did that through this parameter. So that's the URL that it passed. And there's some stuff going on behind the scenes in the Power App that's able to read that parameter and know how to route me. So let's take a look and see how we can finish the loop on implementing this from the Power App side of things. So the list formatting was relatively straightforward. We just hand over our Power App CID, but the hard part or the more involved part is in the Power App side of things. So I have my application open in edit mode here. And if we look at the tree view and expand that out, one of the properties we have in the upper left-hand corner is this app property. So if we click on that, we have a drop down in the upper left-hand corner that gives all of the properties or things that we can configure for the application itself. So a few things that we want to click. First is this on start. So in the on start, you'll see that I'm putting a bit of PowerFX code, which is the formula language for Power Apps, to be able to check to see if we have a parameter called session ID. So here we're just doing the function is blank, and we're saying if we put a exclamation point before is blank, that means the opposite if it is not blank. So if there is a parameter basically called session ID, so it's a simple function called param, and you put within that in quotes the name of the parameter you want to look for, then I want to take whatever that value is and put it in a global variable so that I can reference that throughout my Power App. So I'm going to create a variable called selected session, and I'm going to go look up to that SharePoint list, our event itinerary, and I'm going to find the corresponding item that matches that ID and store all the details about that in a local variable to use in my app. And that's pretty much it. If it's not there, it's just business as usual. We're not going to do anything. Now, the final thing is, right now, I'm storing that data, but I'm not dynamically moving to the right screen yet, right? So when the app loads, if that is there, I also want to move to the correct screen rather than just hitting this landing screen. So I need to go to one more property, and it's a relatively new property. So if you've been using Power Apps for a while, but haven't really did much with these parameters and stuff recently, you might not even know about this. There's a brand new property called Start Screen. So it changed the way that we handle kind of navigating based off of parameters. So we'll get the information on the onStart, but now on this start screen, we can actually just do it all here. So we can say, if that same parameter is not blank, then I want to navigate to the session details. So we don't have to use the navigate function because that's all the start screen is doing is it's navigating you to the screen that you want to go to. If it is blank, then I want to go to the session scheduler screen. So those are really all the pieces needed. You're going to get the details about the item itself and the parameter and the details on the onStart. And you're going to do the moving between screens in the start screen property. So that will help us move and have our app function as we want to there. And then in the app itself, like on the session details screen, I'm just pointing to that global variable. That's why we stored the details about the selected session in the global variable so that we can go and fill in the different details on these labels and controls within this particular screen. So that kind of ties the whole process together. The Power App reads that, we click on it, and it opens up the item. But yet if I were to go open up the app, as we saw, it would take me to the session scheduler screen as well, so people can browse that. Now, kind of closing out the problem here, though. So now we gave us a way to, open an existing item, but we still have the new button right here, right? So users could still go in and add new sessions into the list, or they could still go in and edit one of these sessions in the list. Well, again, I don't really want this. I want them to be using my Power Apps application. This is just kind of the data repository. So this isn't an ideal experience. How can we leverage list formatting to be able to maybe hide the edit, even edit in grid view, so that this is just a data repository and all the manipulation of the data is in our application? Well, we can use that new functionality that I was just showing you with Power Automate with the command bar properties to hide those. So if you look at this final example here, we're going to use the command bar properties, and we're going to use the key, and we're going to find the new button, and we're just going to set the visibility with the hide property to true to hide it. And we're going to do the same thing for edit in grid view. So this is going to take those two buttons to edit in grid view and add a new item and hide that so users cannot add new items in any way, whether it's through the grid view or through the new button. So we'll copy this. We'll go back, and again, we apply this stuff to modify the command bar properties in a view, not in a column like we have. So we're going to click on our all items view, and we're going to go to format current view and advanced mode. So I'll paste in our code there and click save. And now you see, as soon as I apply that, the button's gone. I cannot add a new item in here. I cannot edit in grid view. The user doesn't have any way right now to go and add anything into the list. Now, again, this isn't like a true replacement for security because we applied this on a view. So if I were to go and switch a view, right, like to this event grid, I have the new and I have the edit and grid button there. So for one, you want to make sure you apply that to every single view. And people that still have, say, owners access or certain privileges to the list, they could still go in, add their own views, get the new button, modify it, and whatever. So it's not a true security type thing, but it is at least one layer of protection, per se, that you can do to kind of obfuscate the list and make it kind of function more just a true backend rather than giving your users a way to add new items. So really completes that whole experience for being able to leverage SharePoint as a backend for your Power Apps applications. All right, so now I'm going to turn it back over to David to talk about some VS Code for JSON. I love this, this extension here as well.
Awesome. Thank you, April. All right. So when we talk about editing the list formatting experience, a lot of times we've seen how we could utilize the HTML to JSON, but you're largely still coming in to format here directly within the SharePoint or Microsoft list, right? So we're going to edit the view here, or if I were to come in here to the column area and format this column, I'm going to be doing a large position or a large amount of my editing right here in the browser. What if there was a way for us to be able to edit it in something that's a little bit more comfortable to us, perhaps using more tools like VS Code? Well, we absolutely can do that. There is an extension that is available to us. Now, the extension is twofold. The first one is in VS Code. So if you download VS Code, which is completely free, and don't feel like VS Code is only for pro devs or anything like that. There's a whole host of amazing tools that you can use for documentation, for list formatting, for a variety of other things. You'll do a search for an extension, and you can always get there by going to that little property right there, selecting extensions, and then you can search the extensions marketplace and just do SP4 formatter. And that will show up right here by Sergey Sergeev, who is an amazing developer. And that's brought up here, and you would install it. Now, I've already done that here, and there's a video that shows how you can take advantage of that. But you also need to install the browser extension. So there's a Chrome browser extension here that you also from the Chrome store, and this works in Edge, right? Because it is Chromium underneath the covers. You would install that as a browser extension. Now, once the two of those things are installed, I have one showing up right here in my browser on my toolbars right there. You can turn them on. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to move my image over here, turn this off. And what I've done is I've got a couple of files here that I've opened this particular VS Code session up with. I've opened it at a folder level. And so it's looking at my folder called SP Formatter, and I've got a couple of JSON files already created here. One is completely empty. This is what we're going to use to connect our editing session to. The next is one where I'm just already formatted, but by and large, I just wanted to be able to copy and paste. But we're going to be working within this empty one. So I'm going to come over to Twitter, and I'm going to come to column settings, and I'm going to say format this column. I'm going to go to advanced mode, and then I'm going to come up to my SP formatter, and it's going to ask me to turn it on. So we can see that right now it's disabled. So I'm just going to hit enabled, and now you see something has changed down here. It says that it's enabled. Enhanced formatter is enabled. you may need to disable and enable this toggle again if you're switching between columns or form layout options. So you need to keep that in mind. But what I'm also going to do is in my VS Code, I'm going to come to you can hit F1 to kind of access the toolbar. And I'm going to hit SP Formatter, and you're able to contextually see the commands that are available to you. And what we want to do is I want to start a new session. And what that does is it creates a sync between my browser and my VS Code. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to hit start a new session. And now sometimes what you have to do on your browser is just do a little refresh to get it to kind of sync up. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say column settings, format this column. I'm going to go to advanced. And now you'll notice what happens is it says it's connected. VS Code is connected. It even tells me the exact file name that it's connected to, which is my empty file name. And so now I can start creating formatting, right? So for example, if I wanted to, I could take this format right here, and I'm just going to select copy. And I'm going to select paste, and let me move this over here so we're looking at Twitter. Now, what's going to happen that's really, really cool, as soon as I paste this into this window here, we're going to see it immediately be updated. I don't even have to come over here and hit save or preview. It's going to immediately update. So I'm going to hit paste, and bam, immediately it's been updated, showing me my full experience, as well as populating it here directly into my my editor in the browser. So if I wanted to come over here and say, well, you know, let's change the size of this div to 55, 55, and you can see as soon as I'm typing those things, it is actually changing them live. So I've changed my width to 100. Now it's a little more of an oval, and as I change that to 100, then it's now increasing it immediately. And you see that in both places, both the actual experience in the list as well as my editor. So it's fantastic because in VS Code, there's just a lot more tools that you can take advantage of to be able to edit your experience. It might be a more comfortable space, even just the amount of space that's available there might be better. So a very, very powerful tool. We'll give you some links here at the end. We do have just enough time. I want to show just one more thing that you can take advantage of when it comes to list formatting, and that is enhancing the experience using additional tools. So there is a web part that is available to you. Now, this requires installation of a web part, which feel free to reach out to any of us and we can absolutely help you out. But there is a community-based web part that was created by April, myself, and Hugo Bernier called the Enhanced SP Formatter or Enhanced List Formatter. So if I come into my site here, I've got a web part here called Enhanced List Formatting. Now, the purpose of this web part is to, on the page, override the styles that are not available within list formatting. Now, you may have your spidey senses and say, whoa, wait a second, we're not supposed to override areas of the page that we don't own. And you're absolutely right. But the HTML we generated for our list. Remember, when we were in our HTML here, we're able to create custom class names that Microsoft is not going to override. Well, that persists over into our list formatting definition right there. That actually gets embedded into the HTML as an actual HTML class name. So that means if we can inject CSS directly on the page, we can override the experience that is available to us. So what value does that bring us? Well, let's take a look. We, of course, want to use it for good. We don't want to be a villain. We want to be a hero. So this is kind of like that GPS warning when you get in a car and you start driving. It says, hey, pay attention to driving. Don't use this for bad. That's bad. You hit I accept and you hit add custom styles. And what we're able to do is we're able to add some custom styles here that allow you to enhance not only the look and feel from a perspective that you can't do within the list out of the box, but you can enhance the animated experience, the hover experience. And what does that look like? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to paste, and this is nothing but CSS. I'm pasting in some CSS. Now, what has it done? Well, you can see it's made those Polaroids a little bit more askew, right? So it looks a little more natural when you put Polaroids on a table. They're a little more askew to one another, not perfectly aligned. But I've also been able now to create some hover effect. Now, this is using what's called a pseudo attribute within CSS. So now I'm able to draw more attention to the particular community contributor that I want to particularly see. But wait, there's more. What else can you do? Well, we can continue to adjust that using nothing but CSS. Oh, we can do that. Here we go. Oh, I think it pasted wrong. Let me copy that again. Ah, something is not pasting right here. Well, it should color shift. It should turn everything black and white. So I may have accidentally changed my my CSS there. Now let's take a look at another one. I'm going to select and I'm going to paste. There we go. Now it's applying. Something was a little janky there. So now I've combined a couple of things. It's gone black and white. Now when I hover over, it does a color shift. And now I'm able to draw more attention to where I'm choosing to focus my cursor as a user. I've also been able to change the font in a very specific location, right? I changed that font there. That looks a little more natural. You write on those Polaroids, right? Back in the day, and now it's coming back into style. But you'll notice I've also added a little heart there. What does that allow us to do? Well, I've added a little animated sprite. So as I hover over it, that's just using pure CSS. I'm able to provide an additional layer. And I could do something like, well, when I click on that, maybe it ties back to a Power Automate flow like April showed us that designates this as a favorite or something like that. So just taking it a step further, this is absolutely, in addition to being out of the box, you have to have additional components that are 100% free, but shows you the power that you can continue to push the envelope in when it comes to list formatting. So some resources that are available to you. There is a collection of community created samples. We talked about this. This particular URL is absolutely available to you. It takes you to all the list formatting samples that are available. There's well over 100 list formatting samples out there, growing all the time by leaps and bounds. And remember, a lot of the column formatting samples can be used in a view formatting sample. So even though it may not be a view formatting sample that showcases column samples, you absolutely can use them there. We saw that with the Twitter image being used in both column and list. Now, I think there's also a community call that showcases a whole bunch of list formatting. Is that right, April?
There is. It's bi-weekly on Thursdays. And so, as I said, just last week, I believe Chris Kent showed some of the cool stuff that I showed today with list formatting. So he always has a great resources and demos for list formatting on that call, as well as we highlight a lot of Power Platform stuff on that one. So if you're interested in the low code in general, that's a great one to attend. It's every other Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central, and 7 a.m. Pacific. And if you can't catch it live, make sure you check out the YouTube because they are recorded and available on there as well.
Absolutely. Very good. Now, some of those other tools that we showed off, SP Formatter, you can get to that here at bit.ly SP Formatter. There's also the HTML to Formatter. We put the link there in the chat. You can access that here. Now, there's also one other amazing community tool that is available to you called Flyken. We're going to be integrating this into the demo a little bit more, but it is available to you to utilize for iconography. So there is hundreds and hundreds of icons that are available to you. Flyken gives you a quick reference guide to all of those because in some cases the names of the icons are not exactly self-explanatory. We see here cat is, as you would expect a dog to be dog. No, it's called Fang Body or something like that. So it's a little frustrating, and these give you access to a whole bunch of varieties of the same icon, as you can see, whether it's outline or filled, and there's a whole host of those available at flycon.io. With that being said, thank you all for your time. We appreciate your attendance today. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. We're always loving to collaborate with everyone in the community.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Thank you, April. I think I learned a couple new things from the last time I listened to you guys go through this. So really appreciate it. And I think there's a lot of good things going on with that. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right. So I do have the survey in there. So you can let us know what you thought about April and David in their session. Also, I'm going to take you guys off the spotlight, so you don't have to. There we go. And I'm going to stop the recording, so we don't have to worry about that.